The Netherlands is having an identity crisis. What does it mean to be Dutch? I don't remember people agonizing over this question in the past. They are now. What are Dutch values?
We're all equal. We're all the same, and we're very tolerant. And we drink and eat and play and dance together. So that's the good thing about Carnival.
Right, and what about the rest of the time?
Well, it's a bit different. We're not so tolerant anymore.
Why not?
Some people are not so the same as other people. I think the whole Islam thing makes that we're more aware of our values.
Geert Wilders, the Netherlands' answer to Donald Trump, wants to ban the Quran, close the mosques and the borders. In defence of their tolerant way of life, many Dutch people are apparently willing to vote for some pretty intolerant policies. When I was growing up here in the 1980s, the Netherlands, and Amsterdam in particular, felt like this sort of inclusive space, a place that was open and tolerant, where anything goes and anyone really can come and be themselves. It doesn't really feel like that anymore. Something has changed. And so I've come back here to try to find out what's happened to that peculiarly Dutch brand of liberalism. This feels like a country on a difficult journey of self-rediscovery. A country that suffered a sudden loss of faith in a set of truths it once held to be self-evident. On the outskirts of the city, an abandoned shipyard has been taken over by squatters. ADM, as it's known, is a community of artists and performers, the sort of people for whom Amsterdam was once a haven.
It used to be a town with a lot of empty spaces. It was a paradise for people who want to make things or do things together.
A sort of utopia.
It was really a part of a sort of utopia.
When I'm hungry, I eat out of the dumpster. When I'm thirsty, is that your bed? When I'm tired, I find an empty house to sleep in, and if you don't like it, fuck you.
But the welfare state that nourished that utopia is no longer so generous. These days, there's less space for squatters, both physically and politically. Under pressure, perhaps, the collective now has a surprisingly strict membership policy.
Well, everyone is allowed in, but we should be able to send them out if it's not working and then close the gate behind them.
If that sounds like something Geert Wilders might like, well, he's not popular here, but perhaps the fate of the squat in some ways mirrors that of the country.
The group was small enough to control ourselves, and now we became this fantastic, non-conformistic little town. It's no longer a village, so we have to rearrange ourselves.
Squatters were once a defining force in radical Dutch politics. The squatter riots of the 1980s are a vivid and sometimes surreal childhood memory.
In an apparent attempt to defuse the situation, a policeman dressed as Santa Claus was lifted onto the roof by crane.
Against the backdrop of Reaganomics and Thatcherism, the movement was becoming increasingly militant. These were battles over the concept of public versus private space. As the squatters fought the riot police on the streets, an architect specialising in school design was having a similar fight with the education authorities. Ja, het is heel raar om hier weer te zijn, maar heel mooi. I was in the first class of pupils to go to school here. The architect, Herman Hertzberger, believed that buildings had the power to shape society. His aim was to foster a more egalitarian relationship between teacher and pupil.
And I always have the enormous fight for every square meter, you know. And they say it's not necessary because in the classrooms there's a teacher, there's a blackboard, the teacher is saying, this is the way the world works, and we are going to do it like this. But I said, classrooms is one, but there's also the idea of doing things together, seeing what the others are doing, and so we must try to get space also for this communal
the idea of common space. The architecture of the Netherlands tells us about its political development.
Walk along the canals in Amsterdam, you see not 1 or 3 or 4 palaces, no, you see thousands of small palaces of citizens.
At the heart of Dutch liberalism lies a fundamental tension between the sometimes competing notions of liberty and equality, of individualism versus the common good.
These are all group portraits. They are not individual portraits of a king or a count. These are portraits of very proud citizens. We drink together, we fight together, without a king, without a leader, we vote, we are egalitarian.
When we talk about being liberal, it was also economically liberal.
Yes, that is deep in the genes of the Dutch. Descartes, who lived quite a long time in Amsterdam in the beginning of the 17th century, said already, everybody is only occupied here with earning money, nothing else. Money, money, money. That's the big God here.
The burghers of the Golden Age turned the Netherlands into the biggest maritime trading power in Europe. This new prosperity was driven by immigrants, Protestants and Jews fleeing persecution in Catholic Europe.
Because we are a society full of minorities and groups, and we have to survive together. That create a society which has to be tolerant, otherwise we cannot survive.
Tolerance. Growing up, we were taught that tolerance was as much a part of Dutch culture as eating mayonnaise with your chips. And that had less to do with the 17th century than with more recent history. I used to live in one of those buildings over there, number 10, on just the other side of the canal. Before I lived there, some other people did, whose names are commemorated here in these plaques. 7 of them who were murdered by the Nazis during the Second World War because they were Jewish. There are similar plaques all along the canal side here. And during the war, 1/10 of the population of this city were deported to concentration camps. The German occupation had a huge impact on how the Dutch see themselves. Discriminating against people because of their religion, their cultural or ethnic background, that was something that other people did, not the Dutch.
I grew up in a time when all of us in this country were still very much under the impression that we live in the most liberal, progressive country in the world. I used to actually literally say this to people. I know I'm from Amsterdam, so, you know, I live in the best country in the world, the best city in the world, and anything goes, and you're free to be whoever you are. However, now when I look back, I think, oh no, there was definitely a lot going on under the surface that just wasn't discussed.
Beneath the surface, many people felt uncomfortable with the effects of immigration. To speak of that was once taboo, not anymore. Fueled by Geert Wilders, the debate has focused on Islam.
A lot of people think that Islamophobia or anti-Semitism and racism, they're all different things. They're all the same thing. So if we accept...
Sylvana Simons has set up a political party trying to highlight what she says is a hidden current of racism in Dutch society. The reaction has not been good.
Death threats is what I've received just for simply voicing my opinion on this topic.
That doesn't sound like the most tolerant, the most progressive country on earth.
We used to take pride in saying we're so tolerant. And I think that that's our biggest problem. We've been tolerant. We've been tolerating. And tolerating means accepting something that you you really don't actually agree with, but you're just, accepting.
Here's one thing that's definitely changed since I was at school. People seem to have stopped believing that the future will be rosier than the present.
I am from a generation that was just thinking of everything is going to be better, more, and that stopped now. And we feel that our next generation will have more difficulties to keep this level. It's still optimistic, but it's not an optimism of tomorrow everything will be better. It is now an optimism of when we do our best, it will be still tomorrow, still as it is now.
So, conservatism and hard work has won out over progressive politics and anything goes. This really is a different country from the one I remember. At the squatters' camp, it feels like the party's almost over.
Don't be surprised if a crack in the ice appears under your feet. And that's what happens.
Right.
Because you hippie and tolerant and everything is possible. Even here in ADM we had the problem, and I was one of the people always defending everyone, till I found out that it's not enough to be tolerant. A hippie community, it can burst because everybody's taking too much drugs, or everybody went to sleep with everybody, and the real feel is gone.
Perhaps the idea of the Netherlands as free space was never anything more than an illusion. Now, in an age of identity politics, the Dutch are asking themselves some fundamental questions. What does liberalism mean? What are the limits of tolerance? And does the Netherlands still want to be a place that's open and inclusive?